think this could move us into the second question we want to move on. We can kind of talk about the kind of Brazil's embezzlement scandals and what the president's going through right now, and possibly talking about what we can learn about congressmen getting paid higher, getting paid based on commission or anything like that. So, you know, in 2015, throughout March and April, the president of Brazil was going over kind of a lot of alleged involvement in receiving a lot of kickbacks and embezzling from multiple the state-run oil companies. And most recently, she's been there's been a debate within Congress to finally impeach her based on accepting a lot of money from state banks to possibly pay to cover some of the Brazil's deficit. So from kind of this most recent events, what would you guys think we can learn from this about should we pay congressmen higher pay? Should we pay them based on kind of a performance-based commission? Would either of these things kind of result in less embezzlement or less political corruption? What do you guys think would be a good idea for possibly lowering political corruption within Congress or Senate?
Honestly, I think like if we want to lower political corruption, we just have to like make people more aware of the corruption that's already present. Because like if we try to like put a commission on their salaries, then they're gonna like find ways around it, and like they're gonna end up making like probably more money than they do now. Like finding loopholes, they're very good at that.
Oh, yeah.
And then if we just like raise their salaries altogether, then it's not like I still think that they would find ways to get money, and it's not really like that great of an incentive.
Okay.
You can find ways to better hold them accountable and really, I don't know, understand where their money is coming from and what they're doing with it. I don't think that paying them any more than they're already making is going to help anything. If anything, it's going to make citizens angrier. They're already getting paid so much.
I guess like if anything, if you raise like what the amount that you pay Congress, just like the citizens would like shed light on the issue kind of. So maybe people will be like more aware that that's going on. But I don't think like there's like deep corruption like in the U.S. like there's in Brazil. I think that like people just aren't like cognizant of like all the issues that are going on in the government right now. So.
I mean, I think that the best way to combat that would just have people pay attention to elections. Like, I think our government probably the lowest level of corruption is at the presidency because that's the only election that everyone really cares about. I mean, if we actually cared about our councilmen or mayors or representatives, senators, then I think that would be the best way to lower corruption, honestly.
I mean, like, they're not really, like, hiding anything from us. We just, like, aren't taking the time to, like, researching the candidates or looking to see, like, what they're about, you know? Like, we just don't really, like, know who we're voting for. And in a lot of cases, like, we're voting against our own interests.
We just vote for the incumbent because we recognize their name.
Yeah.
I think, like, the question, it's number 9, right, about performance, right? Making their salary commissioner of performance is good for reasons like other than corruption because, like, for example, Marco Rubio, he missed 99 different Senate votes since 2011 as a senator, and like that didn't affect his pay at all. Like, you don't actually have to even show up to be a senator and get paid to be a senator. So I think, like, objectively, without the consideration of whistleblowers or like protection, making their pay commensurate with their performance just makes sense. Like, if you're not going to show up, you shouldn't get paid for not showing up. And I think like the issue of protection necessarily isn't affected by like their actual salary. It's more of an issue of campaign fundraising. Like, they make like tens of millions of dollars in fundraising. About 50% of a congressman's time, and this is according to like Newsweek last year, is spent on fundraising. They actually go and talk to businesses for about half of the time outside of actually being on the Senate floor, which is like or if you're in the House, then the House floor. But outside of that, like 50% of their time is spent talking to like business investors. And so they spend so much time just trying to make money from people donating to their campaign, that like their salary of a few $100,000 a year is really not where their money comes from in terms of like corruption-related issues, because the corruption comes in whenever companies are paying for them to be elected, not paying them personally, and at least in the US, because there's not a whole lot of, like, it's illegal in the US to just pay a person to like vote for you. That's straight illegal and people know that, but there is the issue of like campaign finance where you're not held accountable if you donate like $100 million to some senator's super PAC, or not super PAC, but just PAC, and then they vote for you for the rest of their congressional career, and that's been shown to happen, but it's not considered an issue of corruption because they say, oh, well, they just like me as a senator, it's not that I'm voting for them, but really, it's about, like, if you're gonna vote in favor of their company or against. So I think a lot of the corruption has a little bit less to do with their actual salary and more to do with, like, their campaign itself, taking money from companies.
Yeah, I want to add to them being paid based on kind of a performance. I think it's just a good idea just because I tend to think it's very hypocritical when I see mostly kind of Republican senators who are very in favor of things like getting rid of teacher tenure and paying them based on performance and hiring based on performance, where they themselves have just a fixed salary and it's not, their pay base isn't based on performance. So I think it's kind of, they should kind of lead the way they're kind of expecting everyone else to act. And so yeah, I think performance, but I also think if you were to pay based on performance, it would definitely have to be kind of coming up with a very good complicated system, because if you're a governor and you're getting paid based on performance, not just increasing the economy or something isn't the only factor that makes you a good governor, because they said, we'll pay you based on this, then you're probably just trying to ruin the environment within, trying to create the good economy and trying to ruin everything else.
Yeah, I guess like the pay by performance thing can kind of like, there's kind of like a parallel in that with like, you know how teachers like depending on like what students like standardized test scores are, like sometimes the teacher's salaries like they get paid more if the students make higher grades, and like it's been shown like sometimes teachers will like bubble in the answers or like help the students cheat, and then like teaching is like teaching towards the test, you know. So like whenever you say like performance, I don't know, it's very like it's an ambiguous word, and there's a lot of like there's a lot of like gray area with that.
That's why I was saying, like, specifically, just in terms of like actually showing up and voting, like don't pay them based on like whether or not they're passing bills, because then you're incentivized to pass crappy bills. But do pay them based on whether or not they're actually voting at all. Like if they're voting at least in favor or against something, then they're doing their job. But if they're just not showing up because they're technically in office for their term and they don't have to vote to be in office, then like that's a problem. So like don't incentivize. Yeah, I agree. Like with the teacher testing thing, like it was incentivized that kids do good, but then the result of that is that the teacher is incentivized to make the kids look like they're doing good, and then bad things happen. Like
I feel like this might be a kind of a silly thought or idea, and please say so if it is. But I don't have this idea like we should be able to like grade our like congressmen and stuff. Like, you know, be able to keep track of what they're doing and where the money is going, and then like, you know, actively being polled and like, yo, you know, how well do we think so and so did here and there, and then like the better the grade that they get, that's kind of like, you know,
Like rate my congressman.
yeah, maybe like how rate my congressman, and like the better score they get, like that's kind of what their pay depends on. It's whether or not the citizens are happy with their work or not.
Well, doesn't that already come back to like the point that you first brought up about people need to be more aware of the political candidacies and offices that their already representatives show?
I think that's a great idea. I think the problem would be in who has the time to keep track of that.
True.
And like, even if you're getting from a secondary source, there's going to be half the people who say the secondary source is biased against them because the congressman's a Republican or whatever. The other half's going to say it's biased because the Republican's a Democrat. And it's hard to get, I mean, it's just hard to get unbiased opinions in the media. If you're having to investigate everything yourself, I don't know that much time. I wish I did.
I mean, I guess like voting is kind of like grading. It's like directly
That's how you
grading them.
grade. It's just, we're not educating ourselves.
I think that really comes back to just the citizens seeing how it is that we feel necessary, each personal value of combating corruption in offices. But with the argumentation of the kind of commission-based work and grading them based on how well they perform, it's going to be a different category for everyone. Like, everyone already has different examples of what better work would be, and everyone has different examples. I mean, I'm sure we all agree you should at least be attending more than Marco Rubio has.
Right.
But there's not really like a punch system where someone can come and clock in at the Congress, like, or whatever floor they're a part of, and decide, I'm here, I'm doing my job, and I get to go home at the end of the day, like from 8 to 5 or so.
I think that another pitfall that we get partisan politics, because there's like, I don't know, say there's a Democratic senator or congressman or whatever. There's going to be tons of Republicans who are going to go on this website and rate him badly just because he's not from their political party. And so should we let that affect it? I think also grading things based on the pay scale will de-incentivize, will not provide incentives for good people to go into politics. I mean, if we want smart people in politics, we have to provide incentives, or else we'll just do something else. And they'll be good at it because it's want to make a lot of money. So I don't think that the best people are going to go into politics out of the goodness of their heart. Not completely, at least.
Yeah, I mean, look at the candidates we have.
The thing is, it's not about necessarily getting good people in politics. It's like getting representative people in politics, and even though that sometimes sucks, like, that's the point of the system. Like, you might incentivize people to only pander to the voters, but that's the point of the democratic system in the first place, is to pander to the voters. And so, like, and I think what you're saying about, like, you know, Democrats going on Republican senators and saying, oh, I think, you know, if it was a real system,
Yeah.
you know, it would be like, rate your own state's congressmen, representatives, right? And that you have to, you know, prove that you're a, you know, person, not, but it's an interesting idea. It checks for, like, accountability in terms of, like, voting in the way that your constituents want you to.
Really off topic, like, this entire thing just brings me up to, like, every time you go and vote, you fill out a 1-minute survey on how you feel your representative is doing. And just like, no one would really do anything. We already have pretty low voter turnout. And it's not like people actually know what they're voting for, who they're voting for. More people know funny meme slogans of candidates than actual meanings and what they have been doing and how often they've changed their views and et cetera, than actually being able to consistently go to a poll, not only tell apart the names and their different ideals, different family styles, because you do take that into consideration. So I feel like it would just be, it's very slippery slope thing to discuss this entire topic, really. There's always going to be some downfalls and some highs, and some people just won't think that the highs outweigh the lows. So I just don't think it's very realistic to speak.